The road not taken back. I never planned on disappearing, but when your family decides you're disposable, sometimes the universe has other plans. My name is Ethan Reeves, and 15 years ago, my family left me stranded at a fated roadside attraction in rural Montana. They thought it would be hilarious. I thought it would be the end of my world. It became the beginning instead. The setup. That summer of 2010, I was 22, working as a glorified errand boy at my father's law firm in Seattle, a position that somehow still required a pressed shirt and tie despite consisting mainly of coffee runs and document filing. According to Harrison Reeves, ESQ, I was building character before eventually joining the family business, a future I'd never wanted but had never found the courage to reject. Our family didn't take vacations. Vacations were for people without ambition, as my father would say while checking his email during Christmas dinner. So when Harrison announced we were taking a family trip to attend my cousin's wedding in Billings, Montana, I should have recognized the anomaly for what it was, a warning sign. My mother, Caroline, nodded along, applying another coat of approval to whatever Harrison decided. My older sister, Vanessa, the golden child who'd already passed the bar and secured an associate position at a rival firm, the only acceptable form of rebellion, seemed equally surprised but quickly adapted her schedule. Networking opportunity, she'd muttered when I questioned her. We took Harrison's prized Mercedes SUV, a vehicle he loved more than most humans. 4 days of driving through the Pacific Northwest, my father and sister alternating between legal discussions that deliberately excluded me and their favorite pastime, highlighting Ethan's inadequacies. My mother occasionally murmured, "That's enough," but her protests were as ineffective as using a paper umbrella in a hurricane. I should explain something about Harrison Reeves. He wasn't just strict, he was methodically cruel. A man who'd built his reputation dismantling people in courtrooms and carried that skill set home. He'd been telling me I was a disappointment since I was old enough to understand the concept. His favorite phrase, "You lack the temperament for success," delivered with clinical precision, like a diagnosis I could never overcome. Vanessa had made her choice early, become the perfect Reeves successor or become the target. I don't blame her. Survival instincts are powerful. The abandonment. It happened at the Frontier Days Museum and Rest Stop, this kitschy tourist trap, with a small museum dedicated to pioneer life, a convenience store and restrooms. We'd been driving for hours through endless Montana grasslands, mountains looming in the distance. I'd been sleeping in the back seat, my neck cramped at an impossible angle. I stepped out, stretching beneath the vast Montana sky. I was wearing khakis and a faded Northwestern University t-shirt, my alma mater, and another disappointment. I'd majored in English literature instead of pre-law. My phone was at 2% battery, plugged into the car charger. "I'm hitting the restroom," I called out. No one acknowledged me. Typical. The restroom was empty, smelling of industrial cleaner and neglect. When I walked back outside, squinting in the harsh summer sunlight, the parking spot was empty. The glossy black Mercedes was gone. At first, I thought they'd moved to a different spot, some lame joke at my expense. I circled the entire rest stop, checking every corner of the parking lot. Nothing. I waited an hour, sitting on a bench near the entrance, telling myself they were just trying to teach me some kind of lesson. People came and went, a few giving me curious glances. An older couple asked if I needed help. I lied, said I was waiting for friends who were inside. After 2 hours, I felt a coldness seeping into my bones that had nothing to do with the temperature. They weren't coming back. My first instinct was to borrow someone's phone, call them, and beg them to return. As I was about to approach a family with kids, a sudden clarity hit me like a thunderbolt. I could almost hear them laughing. Vanessa's perfectly calibrated mockery. "I bet he's having a complete meltdown right now." My father's dismissive certainty. He'll figure it out if he has any of the Reeves intelligence. My mother's weak protests that changed nothing, so I made a decision. I approached the family, borrowed the father's phone, but I didn't call my family. I called information and got the number for the nearest shelter in Billings, about 45 miles away. Then I asked if they could possibly give me a ride into town, making up a story about my friends having an emergency and needing to leave suddenly. The father, Dave, I later learned, hesitated but agreed after conferring with his wife. "We're heading that way anyway," he said, though I suspect that was a kind lie. That first night at the Hope Harbor shelter was a reality check. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. No ID, no money, no contacts. The shelter coordinator, Maria, let me use their ancient desktop computer to look up my cousin's wedding details from the invitation I'd glimpsed. I stared at the screen, wedding venue information staring back at me, and thought, why? Why chase after people who literally abandoned me on the side of the road for their amusement? Instead, I created a new email account. I researched emergency ID replacement procedures. I looked up jobs that paid cash. I made a plan, starting over. 3 days later, I was washing dishes at the Wildflower Bakery and Cafe. The owner, Ruth Kingsley, was a 60-something woman with silver hair, sleeve tattoos that told the story of her biker youth, and more kindness than I'd encountered in my entire life in the Reeves household. I'd wandered in, asked if they needed help, explained my wallet had been stolen. She studied me for a long moment, then said, "Dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me, I'll hunt you down myself. Start now. There's something clarifying about rock bottom. You can only go up from there." For 2 weeks, I worked doubles, slept at the shelter, wore donated clothes. Maria helped me start the process of getting replacement ID by contacting Vital Records in Washington. 8 days after they abandoned me, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was my mother, her voice trembling. Where was I? Was I okay? They'd been looking everywhere. It was just supposed to be a joke. They'd driven down the road, waited 20 minutes, come back, and couldn't find me. I listened to her panic, her artificial concern. In the background, I could hear my father saying to tell me to stop being dramatic and get to the wedding venue. Vanessa was laughing. "Ethan, are you there? Say something. We've been worried sick." That cold feeling was gone now. In its place was something unexpected, clarity. "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own," I said, my voice steadier than it had ever been when speaking to them. "So watch me." I hung up, blocked the number. Then I blocked every family contact I could remember. The next day, I went to the Verizon store and changed my number completely. 23 missed calls before I changed that number. I imagined them growing increasingly furious when they realized their punching bag wasn't returning to be punched. Building a life. A month later, I had my own studio apartment above a local bookstore. It was tiny and smelled perpetually of paper and coffee, but it was mine. I worked my way up from dishwasher to prep cook at the Wildflower. Ruth started teaching me how to bake bread, saying I had good hands for it. Occasionally, I'd check my old email, the one my family knew. Messages piled up. From Mom, "Please come home. We're sorry." From Dad, "This childish stunt needs to end now. Your position at the firm is becoming untenable." From Vanessa, "Dude, it was just a joke. Stop being so dramatic." I never responded. Not once. Freedom, once tasted, makes returning to the cage unthinkable. I won't pretend it was easy. Some nights I'd scroll through social media, see pictures of former classmates with their normal, functional families, and feel an ache no amount of achievement could fill. Holidays were particularly difficult, but every morning I'd wake up in my small apartment, go to my dishwashing job where nobody called me a disappointment, and build my life one day at a time. 3 months after being abandoned, I checked my email one last time. A new message from my mother. "Your grandfather is asking about you. Please just let us know you're alive." I closed the email, deleted the account, threw my old SIM card in the dumpster behind the wildflower. That evening, Ruth taught me how to make her famous sourdough bread, said I had natural talent for it. It was the first genuine compliment I could remember receiving in years. I never looked back. 5 years later, 5 years after being abandoned at that Montana rest stop, I found myself staring at a familiar face on my Facebook feed. Not because I was stalking my family's profiles, okay, maybe I was, but because Vanessa had been tagged in a Seattle Times article. She'd been indicted for evidence tampering in a high-profile case. The newspaper used her law firm headshot, poised, confident, perfect. Nothing like the shell-shocked expression in her mugshot. Karma moves at its own pace, but it never forgets an address. By then, I'd built something resembling a real life in Billings. My studio above the bookstore had eventually given way to a one-bedroom with actual windows and a balcony where I grew herbs in mismatched pots. I'd worked my way up from dishwasher to baker to assistant manager at the Wildflower. Ruth still ran the place with equal parts tough love and flower-dusted wisdom, but she'd started treating me less like a charity case and more like the son she never had. My first significant purchase when I had actual savings was a decent laptop. Nothing fancy, just enough to take online classes through Montana State University. Business management, culinary arts, marketing. The subjects Harrison had dismissed as hobbies, not careers. I'd spend mornings at the Wildflower, afternoons studying, evenings experimenting with recipes. Rinse, repeat. I was still damaged goods in many ways. Trust issues, more like trust subscriptions that I could cancel anytime someone got too close. I'd made exactly 2 friends in 5 years. My neighbor Leo, who played saxophone in a jazz quartet and sometimes invited me to their gigs, and Ruth, if employerman or surrogate mother counted as friend. That changed when Mia started coming into the Wildflower every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. Always ordered the same thing: cranberry orange scone, black coffee, no room for cream. Always sat by the window with her laptop, typing furiously. A writer I later discovered, working on her first novel, while managing the local library's social media accounts to pay the bills. She had this way of completely disappearing into her work, coffee growing cold beside her, oblivious to everything. I started timing her focus sessions. Record was 68 minutes before she'd suddenly blink, look around confused, and take a sip of her now frigid coffee. 3 months of me silently replacing her cold coffee with fresh cups before she actually noticed me. Really noticed me. "You've been doing this all this time?" she asked, looking genuinely bewildered. I shrugged. "You seem like you need the coffee more than you need to be interrupted. What do I owe you for all these refills? A name for your main character?" And somehow that became our thing. I'd bring fresh coffee. She'd tell me about her novel's progress. The stupidest flirting in human history, but it worked. Our first date wasn't even supposed to be a date. The Wildflower had just launched a new line of artisanal breads, and I'd stayed late experimenting with a particularly stubborn rye recipe. Mia had been working late at the library across the street. We were the only 2 people downtown at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, both starving, both too tired to cook. "There's this 24-hour diner on Mitchell," she suggested, standing in the Wildflower's doorway as I locked up. Next thing I knew, we were sitting across from each other at Starlight Diner, sharing mediocre mozzarella sticks and talking until 3 a.m. like we'd known each other forever. 6 months later, she moved into my apartment. A year after that, we got a slightly bigger place together. A 2-bedroom with a kitchen that didn't double as a hallway and neighbors who didn't practice saxophone solos during insomnia episodes. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on my family through fake social media accounts. Not proud of it, but there it is. My father's law firm started hemorrhaging clients after a scandal involving misappropriated funds. I watched his LinkedIn profile update with increasingly less prestigious positions. My mother's social media became a shrine to family. Constant throwback pictures of happier times, with careful cropping to remove any evidence I had ever existed. Vanessa managed to avoid disbarment, but was relegated to document review at a strip mall law office, her posts full of vague inspirational quotes about weathering storms and comeback stories. 3 years in, Ruth took me aside during inventory and told me she was thinking about selling the wild flower. Her arthritis was making long days of baking increasingly difficult. She asked if I'd be interested in buying in as a partner, maybe taking over completely someday. I didn't sleep that night, kept thinking it was some kind of test or trick. People like me didn't get opportunities like that. Harrison had made sure I understood that much. That's the thing about poisonous beliefs. They stay in your system long after you've escaped the snake. But I said yes because Mia, half asleep beside me, mumbled that I'd be an idiot not to. Because Leo, through a haze of cigarette smoke when I mentioned it, said, "Dude, you basically run the place already." Because Ruth wasn't Harrison, wasn't my family, and had never once made me feel like I was worthless. The Wildflower and Bread Company relaunched 6 months later. Same cozy vibe, expanded menu. My menu. I worked 80-hour weeks that first year. Lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Fought with Mia about never being home. Found passive-aggressive post-it notes on the refrigerator more times than I care to admit. But it worked. People came. People returned. The bread was good. The atmosphere was better. We weren't getting rich, but we were making it. For years after being abandoned, I made enough to help Mia publish her novel. Not all of it, but enough to hire a good editor and cover designer. She cried when I showed her the receipt. Not delicate movie tears, but ugly real, crying with hiccups and mascara tracks. I'd never felt more like a real person than in that moment. Then my grandfather died. The past comes knocking. I found out through a Seattle obituary my Google alert caught. James Reeves, respected judge, civic leader, father of Harrison, grandfather of Vanessa, and that was it. No mention of a second grandchild. I had been erased so completely they couldn't even acknowledge my existence in death notices. Grandpa James had been the only one who ever saw me in that family. He'd slip me books when no one was looking. Hemingway, Steinbeck, authors my father dismissed as impractical. He'd ask about my writing, my thoughts, the things that made me me instead of a disappointing carbon copy of the Reeves legacy. I thought about going to the funeral, even looked up flights. Mia said she'd come with me, hold my hand through the whole awful reunion. Leo offered his beaten-up Subaru if I wanted to drive instead. Ruth just shrugged and said, "Dead people don't care if you're there or not, so do what brings you peace." I didn't go. Instead, I sent flowers. Simple arrangement. Card signed, Ethan, with no return address. The explosion on social media was immediate. My mother posting about signs and healing. Vanessa making cryptic comments about prodigal sons. My father saying nothing publicly. But I could imagine the storm behind closed doors. A week later, I got a friend request from a profile I didn't recognize. Some random name, no posts, no friends. I almost deleted it until I saw the message. It's Uncle Thomas. Your mother gave me your old email, but it bounced back. Are you okay? Everyone's been asking about you. Your father has been looking for you. I blocked the account. That night, I had my first panic attack in years, sitting on our bathroom floor at 3 a.m., trying not to wake Mia, feeling like my lungs were collapsing, imagining Harrison tracking me down, showing up at the Wildflower, destroying everything I'd built. Mia found me there an hour later. Didn't ask questions. Just sat with me, her shoulder against mine. When I could finally breathe again, she said the simplest thing. They can't take anything from you that you don't give them. The next morning, I called a lawyer, got advice on restraining orders, just in case. Tightened privacy settings on everything. Asked Ruth to alert staff not to give out information about me to anyone. Practical steps. Control what you can control. 10 years later, 10 years to the day after being abandoned, I married Mia in a small ceremony at a local sculpture garden. Leo was my best man. Ruth made the cake and cried through the entire ceremony, hugging me so hard afterward I thought my ribs might crack. Mia's large, boisterous family adopted me instantly. Her father telling dad jokes that somehow didn't make me flinch, her mother hugging me without setting off internal alarm bells. 3 sisters who treated me like I'd always been there. That's the thing about family. Sometimes it finds you when you've stopped looking. A month after the wedding, scrolling through my dummy account late at night. Old habits die hard. I saw it. A post from my father on a community page, looking for information on my son, Ethan Reeves. Last known location, Billings, Montana. Family emergency. There was no emergency. I knew that much. What I didn't know was why. After 10 years of nothing, they were suddenly looking for me. So I dug deeper, created another fake account, joined the community groups from Seattle, pieced together bits of information. The law firm had closed completely. Their house had been sold in a short sale. My mother had been diagnosed with something she was vague posting about. Vanessa had moved back home after her second divorce. They weren't looking for me because they missed me. They were looking for me because they needed something. And you know what? For the first time in 10 years, I smiled when I thought about them. Not because I was happy about their misfortune, but because I realized something important. I didn't care anymore. I closed the laptop, crawled into bed next to my sleeping wife, and made a decision. I would keep watching from a distance, not out of hate, not out of love, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do. It's what you build while they're busy destroying themselves. 15 years later, the end of the road. It started with an email notification. 15 years after being abandoned at that Montana rest stop, my carefully constructed life had a glitch. The contact form on the Wildflowers website had a new message. To the attention of Ethan Reeves, we represent the estate of Harrison Reeves. Please contact our offices at your earliest convenience regarding an urgent inheritance matter. That's the thing about the past. It's patient. It'll wait in the tall grass for years before it strikes. By then, my life looked nothing like those early days in Billings. The Wildflower had expanded to 3 locations across Montana, not some massive chain, but enough that I didn't have to work the line anymore except when I wanted to. Ruth had fully retired 5 years earlier, though she still showed up unannounced to critique my sourdough technique. Mia had published 3 novels, still not bestsellers, but with a devoted following and respectable sales. We had moved from our 2-bedroom to a restored Craftsman near the university. We had 2 children, Oliver, 7, and Alice, 4, who had never known the Reeves family or the weight of expectation that came with that name. I'd assumed Harrison was still alive, still running what remained of his legal career into the ground. My occasional family check-ins had dwindled to maybe once a year. Last I knew, my parents had downsized to a condo after selling the family home. Vanessa had moved to Portland, started over at a small environmental law firm. The email rattled me, though. 15 years of silence, and now this. I mentioned it to Mia as we were doing our Sunday night routine, folding laundry while half-watching whatever streaming show we were currently behind on. "Are you going to respond?" she asked, matching small superhero socks that belonged to Oliver. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Whatever you decide," she said. "Remember, they can't take anything from you that you don't give them." 3 days later, I was at Wildflower East, our second location, helping with the morning rush because 2 employees had called in sick when Zoe at the counter called back that there was someone asking specifically for me. My first thought was it must be Mia's parents, who sometimes surprised us when passing through. I headed to the front, already planning how to convince them to stay for dinner. It wasn't Mia's family. Vanessa looked different, softer somehow, the sharp edges of ambition worn down by life. Her expensive power suits replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. There was a man with her I didn't recognize, and a teenager hanging back, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. Nobody spoke. The morning bustle of the bakery faded away until all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Vanessa broke first. "Ethan," she said, like a question, though she clearly knew it was me. I nodded, my voice apparently on sabbatical. Look, I'd imagined this moment 1,000 different ways over 15 years. In some versions, I told them off spectacularly. In others, I was cool and distant, unbothered by their existence. In a few embarrassing late-night scenarios, we even had tearful reconciliations. Reality is always messier than imagination. I gestured to an empty table in the corner, told Zoe to bring coffees, sat down across from my sister and waited. Harrison was dead. Heart attack. 3 weeks ago. The man with her was her husband Greg. The teenager was her son, my nephew Michael. "Dad left you half the estate," she said without preamble. "And a letter." I must have looked as shocked as I felt, because she actually gave a bitter laugh. Trust me, I was equally surprised. According to Vanessa, our father had started looking for me in earnest about 5 years ago, after his first heart attack. He'd hired private investigators who'd tracked me to Billings, to the Wildflower. He'd planned to come himself. Then his health had deteriorated. "He wasn't a good father," Vanessa said, staring into her coffee. "To either of us. I just chose a different way of dealing with it." She slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside was a lawyer's letter outlining my inheritance. Half of what remained of Harrison's estate after debts, not much apparently, his collection of first edition books, the only thing he truly valued, and a sealed personal letter. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to throw it all back in her face. "Why did you really come here, Vanessa? You could have mailed this." She looked up, and for a moment I saw something I'd never seen in her before: vulnerability. Because I have a 17-year-old son who just lost his grandfather, and I don't want him growing up thinking family is disposable. She glanced at Michael, who was studiously pretending not to listen while scrolling on his phone. "And because I owe you an apology 15 years overdue." She told me how my disappearance had eventually shattered the family facade. How the joke that went wrong had exposed the rot at our core. How our mother had never forgiven our father. How their marriage had deteriorated into mutual contempt. How Vanessa's perfect career had collapsed under the weight of trying to be what Harrison wanted. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I'm not even asking for a relationship. She trailed off, then gathered herself. "I just thought you should have the choice I never gave you 15 years ago. I invited them to dinner at our house that night. Said I needed to talk to Mia." Vanessa agreed quickly, relief evident on her face. That afternoon was surreal. I picked Oliver up from his soccer practice, helped Alice with her preschool art project, all while texting Mia about who was coming to dinner. She offered to take the kids to her sister's. I said no. I wanted them there, wanted my family to meet what remained of my first family. Dinner was lasagna, a recipe I'd perfected over years of Sunday family meals. Oliver set the table without being asked, carefully placing forks on the wrong side until Mia quietly corrected him. Alice insisted on wearing her princess dress because it was Tuesday, and apparently Tuesday was now Princess Day. When the doorbell rang, I almost dropped the salad bowl I was carrying. Mia squeezed my arm as she passed, whispered that she had my back no matter what. The kids looked up curiously, sensing something important was happening. That's the thing about moments you've dreaded. When they finally arrive, they're simultaneously worse and better than you imagined. Introductions were awkward. Vanessa kept calling Mia Maya, despite corrections. Michael couldn't stop staring at the family photos on our walls, his expression unreadable. Greg made actual efforts at normal conversation, complimenting the house, the food, asking about the wildflower, with what seemed like genuine interest. After dinner, Mia took the kids upstairs for baths and bedtime, giving me a look that clearly said text if you need extraction. Then it was just me, Vanessa, Greg, and Michael in a living room that suddenly felt too small. "Have you read the letter?" Vanessa asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not yet. He wrote it years ago, apparently. Updated it every year. Made me promise to deliver it personally if..." She trailed off. I went to my office, retrieved the still-sealed envelope, turned it over in my hands. Harrison's distinctive handwriting on the front. "For Ethan, when I'm gone." I opened it there, in front of them, half expecting some final cruel jab from beyond the grave. The letter was pages long, handwriting growing shakier toward the end. It started formally, almost like a legal document, but gradually transformed into something I never thought Harrison capable of: humility. He wrote about regret, about realizing too late what he'd done to his family in the name of legacy and success, about years spent trying to find me, not for forgiveness he didn't deserve, but to at least attempt amends, about watching from a distance as I built something authentic while he lost everything hollow. The final paragraph was dated just weeks before his death. "I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you're reading this, it means Vanessa found the courage I never had. That alone gives me hope that the Reeves name might still stand for something worthwhile, not through me, but perhaps through the both of you, separately or together, however you choose. The books are yours regardless. They're the only things of value I have left, and they always should have been yours anyway. You were the only one who truly loved them." I looked up to find Vanessa watching me, her expression a complicated mix of grief, regret, and something else. Hope, maybe. "He really changed?" I asked, skeptical even now. "Not enough. Not soon enough," she answered honestly. "But yes, he changed." Michael, who had been silent most of the evening, suddenly spoke. "Mom has all your books." When we both looked at him, he shrugged. "The ones you wrote in high school and college. Grandpa kept them, but Mom took them when they sold the house." Vanessa shot him a look that was half irritation, half embarrassment. "I thought you might want them back someday," she admitted. After they left, with tentative plans to meet again before they returned to Portland, I sat on our front porch, Harrison's letter still in my hand. Through the front window, I could see Vanessa and Greg talking in their rental car, Michael in the back seat, headphones on. Mia came outside, handed me a glass of whiskey, sat beside me. "You okay?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," she said, leaning her head against my shoulder. "Or ever really." I thought about the half-inheritance I didn't need, about the first edition books that had once been my only escape, about the nephew who had my grandfather's eyes, about my sister who had chosen survival in her own flawed way. "They can't take anything from you that you don't give them," Mia reminded me gently. "What if it's not about taking any more?" I asked, watching the rental car finally pull away. "What if it's about choosing what to give and to whom?" I never returned to Seattle, never reclaimed my place in the Reeves family narrative. But over the years, I built something new with the remnants. Holiday cards exchanged, occasional visits, my children knowing their cousin, their aunt, pieces of their history without the poison. That's the thing about forgiveness. The real kind isn't something you give once, like a gift. It's something you choose over and over, day by day. Not for them, but for yourself. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, and it isn't what you build. It's who you become despite it all. When Oliver turned 15, I took him to the Montana rest stop, where my life had both ended and begun. It was still there, a bit more rundown, the museum closed, but the same vast sky overhead. This is where everything changed for me, I told him. When they left you? He asked, knowing the outline of the story as appropriate for his age. No, I corrected gently. When I decided not to go back. Sometimes the road not taken leads you exactly where you're supposed to be. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.